Hello, everybody. I'm Paul Ryden. In the 24 and a half years since 9/11, a whole industry has grown around that tragic day. Investigations, conspiracy theories, stories of valor, some true, others exaggerated. There have been movies produced and stories told of sacrifice and heroism. Our guest today, Neil Adams, has written another 9/11 book about one man's heroism that seems as unlikely as it is true. And the book is From the Pile, a 9/11 first responder story. Welcome, Neil Adams from San Francisco. How are you today?
Hi, Paul. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Now, your story about Michael actually predates 9/11. Your friendship with him was already source material for a pretty riveting book. You didn't have a lot in common at first glance. You had been an actor and singer, and you came from a family of writers. Michael's background was completely different. How did you two meet?
Well, he picked me up, frankly. I was
Okay.
working as a waiter in a restaurant during a graveyard shift, and Michael walked in one night drunk, eyed me. Someone that I was working with noticed that, and it was very busy at the time, so I didn't really notice him. But he began chatting me up, and we exchanged numbers, and we hit it off, basically. We just made each other laugh. We had a lot of interests in common and became fast friends really quickly. It's one of the few times in my life that ever happened. And I found his life fascinating when I met him. It was diametrically opposed from anything that I had ever experienced. And so I was very interested in him then and talked to him about writing his story at that time. This was 93 or 94.
Okay.
And he was interested in it and started telling me a lot of things about his life and his stories growing up. Some of the things he wasn't proud about, which I agree he should not have been proud about. And when we started getting to some of those things, he started getting a little bit nervous about telling his life story and thought, maybe I don't want to do this. I said, okay, I understand, but still kept that in mind. And, throughout our almost 30-year friendship, all these things happened. And then when 9/11 happened, I thought, I have to write his story. It's just
Mhm.
too amazing. And as we went through his life and his illness and everything, and towards the end, and we both knew he was getting ready to pass. And I asked him if it was okay if I wrote his story, and he gave me his blessing to do so, which is what I did.
Yeah, and his background is just horrendous. The
Yeah.
family he came from. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, his family was not great. I mean, his mom had his older half brother when she was just 15.
Yeah.
And she had Michael 2 or 3 years or 4 years after that. I can't remember the math off the top of my head.
Mhm.
But he grew up very, in a very rough neighborhood. His older brother got into crime,
Yeah.
started stealing cars and things. Michael was interested in that because he saw that his brother all of a sudden had all this money, and Michael wanted to get some money too. Tried to get into some crime, got caught doing that, so that went away. But then he also noticed that there was a lot of sexual action happening in some of the parks near his where he lived in the Bronx, and got into male prostitution and started making money that way, which is how he contracted AIDS. And he started doing that when he was only 13 years old.
Good grief,
Um,
13 years old?
13, yeah,
Did,
he
did he do
got
that
into
on his
puberty.
own? Somebody.
No, he just matured rapidly. When he was 13 and 16, he looked like he was a lot older than he was.
Mhm.
And he just kind of played it off, and he let people idolize him for let's use that word.
Yeah, that's
And he
one
was
word
making,
for it.
yeah, and he was making money off doing that. But then he also contracted AIDS, and he was diagnosed with AIDS when he was 16 years old.
Oh, good grief. And how long did he live after
He
that?
lived till he was about, he died in 2020. He died around Thanksgiving of 2020. So he was around 54, I think, 53,
Oh,
54 when he
gosh.
passed. Yeah,
Now,
very young.
you wrote in your book that the abusive relationship from which he came actually drove Michael to perform a heroic act. How is that? How does that square?
I square it by with redemption. I think Michael knew that he had done a lot of things in his life that he wasn't necessarily proud of. He knew he had AIDS. He had already been in the hospital a few times, close to dying. And when 9/11 happened, he was a medical technician. He had worked his way through high school, through college. He graduated college. The only one in his family who ever did that, became a veterinary technician. And by because he was a veterinary technician, he owned some scrubs. And so when 9/11 happened, he rushed down to the World Trade Center to see if he could help. They saw this person in scrubs. They assumed he was a medical technician, and they allowed him in to help the firefighters who were working to help rescue people. And within that time, he was only there for about 24 hours. And that time they found out that he was actually a vet technician. He wasn't for humans.
Yeah. No
And
animals in the World Trade Center, I guess.
no, well, there were
Well, I guess there
cadaver
were.
dogs there, but yes, he wasn't qualified to do the medical things that they thought he would be able to do, and so they sent him home the next day.
So he was
Um,
not what you say, you call about
well,
a first
just
responders. Oh, go on. I'm sorry.
yeah,
I'm
but
sorry.
I'm sorry, just to square the point.
Yeah, yeah.
The reason he did that is because he thought, he wasn't going to have a long life anyway.
Hmm.
And so he thought if he could help some people live and help save some people, that would kind of increase his karma, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. So he wasn't like a first responder in the classical sense. I mean,
No, he was
a
a
doctor, a
civilian.
firefighter, or anything, but he
He
was
was a
just a
civilian. He went down there as a civilian to help. Yeah.
wow. But that was at 8:30 in the morning or something like that. And he
Yeah.
was just, how did he live nearby?
No, he was living in the Bronx at the time, and all the subways had shut down. So, but the Long Island Railroad system was still going, so he was able to take the Long Island Railroad down to the World Trade Center to get there to help.
Good grief. So how
Yeah.
long was he down there before they got him out?
Roughly 24 hours. 24. He started talking to lots of people. He was interacting with a lot of the firefighters. He was helping with their rescue efforts. But then he started talking to a lot of the police officers, and he became very interested in what the police officers were doing. One of his former partners who had passed, the stories in the book too,
Mhm.
was also a cop. And so Michael wanted to become a cop as well. And so after his time on 9/11, he became a volunteer police officer and worked for the NYPD as a volunteer police officer for the rest of his life.
No, Michael seemed like the kind of guy who had nothing but bad things happen to him, especially early on in his life.
Yeah.
What do you suppose changed him? Because he obviously he wanted to, like you said, redeem himself somehow.
Yeah. I don't know. And I don't want to say it was me or anything. I mean, I only know the influence I had on him and the many conversations about my perspective about my morals and value systems. And because he wasn't grown up with a strong moral value system in his home life. He
Right.
got one after he left his home. That story's in the book too. But I think those things he started to realize, this is how I have to function in society. If I'm going to be a good, honest, upright person, these are mistakes that I've made in my life. I'm going to try to correct them moving forward with my life, and which is what he did. So
You know,
it's a story of redemption as well.
I don't think you can undersell your role in it either. I mean, I think
Oh.
you must have had a positive influence
I,
on him.
I hope so. I mean, I hope so. I mean, we talked even when I moved back to San Francisco, and we spoke at least every week for hours at a time. And, he would talk to me about his problems, and I would try to be an ear to him and give him advice on things the way I saw it and try to help him steer clear towards, the light.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
Where were you on 9/11 when all this was happening?
I was here in San Francisco, so I had our own story. I was actually at work. I usually get to work very early in the mornings and heard about 9/11. And I was working in San Francisco, but I was living in Marin at the time and was talking to one of my coworkers and said, "You just better get home because we didn't know what was going to happen.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
we
they
thought
were.
maybe some bridges might be taken out. So I wanted to
Mhm.
get back over the bridge and get home before that luckily didn't happen, but we didn't know at the time.
Yeah.
So that was my experience was nothing like his, but yeah.
Were you in contact with Michael at that on that day or shortly after? You
No,
must have wondered what's going on with Michael.
I did. I did wonder what was going on. And this story's in the book too. We actually had a split with our friendship that lasted a little over 4 years. And
Mhm.
so it was during this time that I had no idea what he was doing for 9/11.
Oh.
And so it wasn't until we reconnected afterwards, he started telling me all these stories. So I was amazed and very proud of him for what he did on that day. And I was blown away by it. But
When was the last time you
but not surprised. Yeah.
well, yeah, okay, there you go. When was the last time you saw and spoke with Michael?
Last time I saw him was before the COVID outbreak.
Mhm.
So I went back to visit him and his partner Aaron in Pennsylvania. in June of 2019,
Hmm.
and had a lovely time. We celebrated my birthday. We did a nice trip. Michael was, sick. He was sick at the time. He was still struggling with a lot of issues, and it curtailed a lot of the activities that he wanted us to do together, but it didn't matter. We just wanted to be together. And then unfortunately, 2020 happened and COVID and lockdown, and all we could do was FaceTime during that period. And it was during that year that the cancer finally took him.
Was it difficult to write the book? I mean, you were so close with him, and
Yeah.
then reliving all those things, and it must have been difficult. What was that process like for you?
It was quite a year process because as I mentioned earlier, I began writing and taking notes back in, the early to mid 90s and started
Hmm.
writing things then. And, then during 2020, I was again making notes of little things that happened just in my mind in case Michael ever gave me permission to do this.
Hmm.
But yeah, it was hard. I mean, it was a lot of introspection. It was a lot of memory, a lot of feelings, came up. Some things were easier for me to write than others because I was not as personally involved. I was, a spectator, so to
Yeah,
speak. But knew all the details and everything. So
but now,
parts of it were hard, parts of it were easy, parts of it were a lot of soul searching too.
uh,
So it wasn't easy, um, but I was glad I did it.
and you take some literary license in there as well, which
Yeah.
is necessary, and change some names and so on.
Yeah, I wanted to protect the names of people who are innocent, their names of people who are famous or who have passed, and their names are in there. Or if they gave me permission to use their names,
Hmm.
I used them. But everyone else's names I changed. I did take some literary license because, for obvious reasons, I wasn't there when he was born, and
Right,
so
sure.
I took his stories and wanted to make it relatable. So yeah.
Well, you come from a family of writers, and so you know what you're doing. Who's in this family of writers that we hear about?
The two prominent ones were my grandfather, who was a writer, wrote several books on wine and trout and bass fishing. In
Oh,
fact, he was inducted into the Vintners Hall of Fame. And at the Culinary Institute up here in St. Helena, his plaque is actually there as someone who was inducted into the Wall of Fame, or sorry, the Wine Hall of Fame.
oh,
So
no kidding.
that's him. And then my uncle was a journalist and wrote for the San Francisco Examiner for 40 or 50 years.
Hmm.
My dad was a journalism major. I did a lot of writing in college and high school and everything. And, did some writing as an actor as well, too, but nothing got published until this story, which I just knew completely and I knew I could tell it, which is what I did.
And as far as I could tell, you never used Michael's last name.
No, I didn't. I mean, his name is out there. I mean, his name is out there. He was interviewed by Spike Lee
Right,
on
for the
Spike Lee's
documentary. Yeah.
for his documentary. So he introduced Michael there. The police department, they awarded him the Medal of Valor because
Hmm.
of his what he did for 9/11.
Yeah.
So his name is out there. I didn't put anyone's last name in the book unless they were like Spike Lee or someone like that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
What do you hope readers get out of this book? Maybe something that maybe Michael would have wanted and something you'd want readers to get.
Very good question. I think what Michael would want is, I mean, I put this in the book too, in case there are people out there that are suffering from maladies that they may have contracted because of being south of Houston Street, or south of, I think it's Houston Street in Manhattan. If they have any symptoms, or they still have money that they can get to them. So if people are sick because of 9/11, he wants
Mm.
people to know money is still available to them to help them with any health emergencies. For me, what I hope people can learn is just maybe take some of his life lessons and apply them to their own. And some of the mistakes that he made, maybe we can avoid them or learn from some of his mistakes that we can apply to our own lives. And
Mhm.
just, some things that we can learn and apply to our friends or family members, things like that. So,
Is there that website you were talking about people who may be affected? Is there a website that they can
oh,
go to?
there's a Victims Compensation Fund and the
Mhm.
World Trade Center Fund. So if they check out the Victims Compensation Fund and the World Trade Center Fund, anyone who is affected by being around the attacks on 9/11, money is owed them. They can get that money.
Well, Neil, thanks so much for being with us. I know that this is a labor of love and something that hopefully a lot of people will benefit from, even from something that happened 24 and a half years ago.
Yeah,
The
it's
legacy lives
25th
on.
anniversary of 9/11 is
Coming
this
up.
year. So,
All
yeah,
right.
it's coming up.
Well,
So
Neil, thanks again so much for joining us. And thank you, folks. The name of the book, again, From the Pile, a 9/11 first responder story. Hey, listen, thanks for joining us. And thank you, folks, for spending a few minutes with us on the Global Book Network. I'm Paul Ryden. We'll see you next time.